Hello, my name's Leah. I'm the Senior Advisor at Norfolk Sendias. I'm just going to do a really quick overview of a governors meeting following a suspension or an exclusion from a place of learning. So what the governing body must do. The governing body must consider the reinstatement of a suspended pupil within 15 school days of receiving notice of the suspension if the suspension period would bring the pupil's total number of school days of suspension to more than 15 in a term. The exclusion is permanent, or if the exclusion would result in the pupil missing a public examination or a national curriculum test. It's worth noting that you can ask as a parent, carer or young person, you can ask for a governing body meeting if the suspension is under 15 days, but they do not have to, it's not a duty. So here's just an overview of the governor's meeting. So it's really important to note that following a permanent exclusion or an exclusion that is more than 15 days, like in the previous slide, the parent, carer or the young person will be invited to a meeting with the governing board, and this must happen within 15 school days. It's important that the parent, carer views along with the child and young person views are given to the board, so you will have a date whereby you have to make sure that you have any evidence or any statements that you wish the governing board to look at. You will have a date where you have to do that by, but it's really important that that's submitted because fundamentally the meeting is an opportunity for the parent or carer or young person to ask the governing board to overturn the decision that's been made by the head teacher. If following the meeting the governing board doesn't overturn the decision, then you have the right to ask for an independent review panel, so an RIP. You must do this within 15 school days of receiving the decision letter following the governing board meeting. So as I said earlier, the fixed term suspensions are slightly different. If it's a permanent exclusion, then that governing board meeting has to happen, and it has to happen within the 15 school days. But here's just a graph that shows the fixed term suspensions and how that differs. So if it's a lunchtime or half a day suspension or a suspension that is 1 to 5 days, like I said earlier, the governing body may agree to a meeting if a parent or carer requests one, but it's not a duty. It doesn't have to happen. Once you get to the 5.5 days plus, up until 15 days, then the meeting of the governing body has to happen, but it can be within 50 school days. And if it is 15 days plus in a term, then it has to be within that 15 school days. So like I said earlier, a permanent exclusion and a fixed term suspension of more than 15 days in a term are the only times where the governing body have to meet within the 15 days that we spoke about, the 15 school days. So a few slides ago, I stressed the importance of making sure that the parent, carer and the child or young person is involved in this process and the evidence and information is given from their side. So as stated here, any information or evidence related to the case must be sent to the governors before the meeting. So you can't just bring extra evidence at the meeting. It has to be presented to them beforehand. And they should try and circulate the papers at least 5 days before the meeting so that all the people who attend that meeting have a chance to read through that evidence and information from both parties. The governors who attend the meeting should not discuss the exclusion with any other parties outside of the meeting, and that means that they can't have a private meeting with the head teacher or a pre-meeting with the head teacher without the parents or carers or young person present. So the purpose of the governors meeting is to decide whether they're going to reinstate the child or young person, and when making this decision they must consider the interests and circumstances of the excluded pupil, have regard to the interest of other pupils and people working at the school, and look at the facts on balance of probability and consider whether the head teacher's decision was lawful, reasonable and procedurally fair. So they must consider all of those things when they're making their decision. And the governors have two options, and they can either reinstate the child or young person immediately or on a particular date, or they can decide to not reinstate the child or young person. The reason that sometimes it might not be immediately is that if it's decided that the child or young person is going to be reinstated, but actually they just need to get some more support in place before that happens, then sometimes it can mean that they reinstate the pupil from a particular date. If the decision is not to reinstate the child or young person, and the parent and carer then can request what I spoke about earlier, the independent review panel, and this must be requested by the parent within 15 school days of that governing board's decision. So following the meeting, you will get a formal decision in a letter or email, often an email. And you have 15 school days from that point to then request an independent review panel meeting. So like I said, that's just a really brief overview of the Governor's Board meeting following a suspension or an exclusion. So if you still have questions, then we do offer some free training on suspensions and exclusions that's bookable via our website. And we also have a booklet about suspensions and exclusions that it goes into much greater depth about the process of suspensions and exclusions, and that's also available via our website, or you can always book an appointment to speak to our helpline advisor, and that would also be via our website.